Welcome to another episode of the Midnight Investigator, where we take an alternative look at moments in history. In 1898, a photographer named Secondo Pia was tasked with photographing the Shroud of Turin, which was housed at Turin's cathedral. He was expecting a faint, disappointing image. But when he developed the glass plate, the negative revealed a far clearer face and body than anyone expected. It was as if the cloth already contained a negative image and the camera had turned it back into a positive. And in that single moment, the Shroud of Turin stopped being just a relic for millions of people, but became an everlasting enigma to this very day. So what exactly is sitting in Turin Cathedral? A medieval artwork? A misunderstood chemical accident? Or something we still don't have an answer for? Before we debate about what this all means, we need to know what we can actually know to date. The Shroud of Turin is a long linen cloth bearing a faint front and back image of a naked man. The image isn't bold like paint. It sits on the very surface of the fibers, more like a discoloration than a drawing. There are also darker reddish marks that appear to correspond with wounds consistent with a violent execution. To some, it's the very burial cloth of Jesus. To others, it's an extraordinary man-made masterpiece, the haunting image of a person who appears to have endured a brutal execution. For centuries, the image was hard to make out with the naked eye. Photography, however, became the turning point. Pia's photos revealed the startling detail, and his images were not the only ones. In 1931, Giuseppe Eneri photographed it again, and the results backed up that same negative effect. Then, in 1978, a scientific team known as STURP examined the shroud in person with portable instruments. Their work became one of the most referenced modern investigations of the cloth. The shroud's story becomes properly visible in the historical record in the 1300s. This is the first clear appearance in France, in a place called Liry, in the mid-14th century. A cloth bearing an image of a crucified man was displayed at the local church, linked to Geoffroy de Charny's family. How they acquired it is unknown, although later claims and hypotheses connect it to spoils of war and, in some versions, a 1345-46 crusading campaign. And the controversy begins almost immediately, because in the late 1300s, Bishop Pierre d'Arquis writes that the image was not miraculous, but man-made. He even claims an artist had confessed it was painted, though the artist's name is not given. Even so, church authorities still permitted devotion while carefully managing how it was described. So from the very start, the shroud steps into history already contested. Then the custody becomes clearer. In 1453, it is transferred to the House of Savoy, and now we're in a period where the shroud's location and handling are far better documented. This is where the shroud endures one of the defining physical events in its history. In 1532, a fire erupted in Chambéry, where it was stored. The folded cloth was burned by intense heat and molten metal, producing the distinctive, symmetrical scorch marks and holes we can still see today. In 1534, 2 years after the fire, the Poor Clare's nuns repaired the shroud with triangular patches and added a backing cloth to strengthen the damaged linen. And those repairs aren't just historical footnotes. Centuries later, they become central to the scientific arguments. In 1578, the shroud was moved to Turin, where it has remained ever since. From that point on, Turin becomes the center of gravity for the mystery. Over the centuries, the cloth is displayed, handled, repaired, photographed, and fiercely protected. In 1997, another fire threatens the cathedral in Turin, and firefighters famously get the shroud out of danger. In 2002, conservators undertook a major restoration, stripping away the 16th century patches and the old backing cloth. The image became easier to study, but it also raised the uncomfortable question: what, if anything, did we lose in the process? So that's the backbone from mid-14th century France to the modern day. Now let's move to the scientific headline most people know. So in 1988, a sample of the linen was radiocarbon dated by 3 laboratories. It's the most famous of the scientific tests, in part because securing permission took years, and the church was cautious about allowing sampling. The result was published in 1989. It dated the linen to the medieval period, roughly 1260 to 1390 AD. If that date really applies to the whole cloth, then the shroud is not a 1st century burial cloth. It is medieval. And that is the uncomfortable part. That range sits almost exactly on the shroud's first clear appearance in history, in the 1350s, as if the timeline and the science are both pointing to the same answer. Sounds like case closed, right? Not quite. Critics point out that the radiocarbon date came from a small sample cut from one corner of the cloth, and they argue that this corner might not represent the shroud as a whole. Critics point to the shroud's long history of repairs, and to contamination from smoke, handling, water, and centuries of exposure. They also raise the possibility that the sampled area could include reweaving, patching, or later threads mixed into the material that was tested. Effectively, what the critics are saying is this: it's like trying to date an old jacket, but the piece you test comes from a newer patch sewn onto the elbow. You'd end up dating the repair, not the original fabric. And defenders of the carbon result respond with their own blunt question. If contamination can shift the date by over 1,000 years, where is the clear proof of that level of contamination? In other words, defenders argue that even if repairs are involved, you'd still need evidence that the tested sample contained a significant amount of much newer material. If the repairs used material from roughly the same era, it wouldn't shift the date by centuries. So the radiocarbon date becomes the center of a tug-of-war. And because most people can't independently verify either claim, the debate becomes cultural as much as scientific. Either way, that argument isn't going away anytime soon. So let's turn to the thing at the center of it all, the image itself. The shroud is often claimed to be the burial cloth of Jesus, and that raises a basic practical question. If a cloth is laid directly over a real human face in the normal way, you'd expect the image to distort when it's later seen laid flat. The nose, cheeks, and contours should spread and warp across the fabric. But the shroud's face doesn't read like a distorted wrap. It reads more like a flattened, coherent image, almost like a photograph. And in 1898, when Secondo Pia photographed it, the negative revealed even more lifelike detail, as if the cloth already contained a negative image. So whatever the shroud is, it doesn't behave like a simple burial cloth in the way most of us would expect. Which leads to the question everyone eventually asks: how was the image made? They didn't have photography in those days, at least not photography in the chemical, film-based sense. But they did have an ancient optical trick called the camera obscura. It's the pinhole effect, where light passing through a tiny opening projects an inverted image onto a surface inside a dark space. Written descriptions go back to antiquity, including Mozi in 4th century BC China, and the phenomenon was later studied in detail by Ibn al-Haytham in the early 11th century. By the 1500s, writers like Giambattista della Porta were even describing the camera obscura as a practical aid for drawing and painting. Okay, so let's explore this line of investigation for a moment. A projected image on its own wouldn't permanently mark linen. For a camera obscura to leave a lasting imprint, the cloth would likely need some kind of light-sensitive coating or a chemical treatment that reacts to light. And with a simple pinhole, the image would be extremely dim, meaning the exposure could be very long, potentially hours or even days. That doesn't prove it happened, but it shows the scale of what would be required for this theory to work. So is it a painting? If it's paint, why is it so superficial and so hard to detect as a conventional painting? Unlike most paintings, the image does not obviously sit in thick pigment layers. So now we jump to 1978, when a research team called STURP carried out a detailed examination of the Shroud in Turin. Their headline conclusion was that they couldn't identify a conventional painting method, reporting no evidence that pigments, paints, or dyes account for the body image, even though the mechanism that formed it remained unexplained. And here's where we have to keep our feet on the ground. We don't have a universally accepted mechanism. Paint, heat, chemistry? A contact imprint? A reaction caused by decomposition gases? Or something that mimics all of those without being any of them? So the shroud sits in this strange zone, not proven miraculous, not easily dismissed as crude, and not comfortably explained. Okay, so we are not getting very far here, and there's something else. Because the shroud also makes specific claims about crucifixion wounds. And one of those claims is the location of the nail wounds. Most traditional Christian art shows nails through the palms. It's iconic. It's instantly recognizable. But many modern medical discussions argue the palms may not reliably support full body weight during crucifixion, and the shroud's wounds are often interpreted as being at the wrists, or at the very least higher than the palm. If that's correct, it raises an uncomfortable question. How does a medieval forger, working in a world flooded with palm nail imagery, land on a more anatomically plausible placement? Was it genius? Was it luck? Was it based on real knowledge that didn't survive widely in art? Or are we misreading the image altogether? So how do we ground that risk question in something real? We go to archaeology. And archaeology gives us a brutal reality. Physical evidence of crucifixion is extremely rare. Bodies were often left to decay or disposed of in ways that don't preserve neat proof. But we do have famous remains from Jerusalem found in 1968, linked to a man called Johanan. And the strongest physical evidence there is a nail through the heel bone. That one nail is a solid, undeniable signature of crucifixion as a real practice. But the arm and hand details are far less clear than popular summaries make them sound. Early reconstructions argued nails in the arms. Later reanalysis challenged parts of that and suggested tying may have played a bigger role than nailing for the upper limbs. Then, in Britain, a separate discovery at Fenstunton in Cambridgeshire revealed another nailed heel bone from a Roman period crucifixion victim. Again, the heel gives us the hard evidence. And again, it reminds us how little survives of the full method. So where does that leave the shroud's wrist detail? It leaves it in the exact place that makes this whole case addictive. It's plausible enough to be unsettling, but not clean enough to be decisive. Because by now, you've seen the pattern. Every time the shroud seems to point clearly one way, it drags a shadow behind it. The carbon dating and the timeline points medieval, but the image behaves strangely towards photography, and the depiction 1st century. So here's the real question to end on. Is this an object that looks mysterious because it's genuinely unique? Or is it an object that looks mysterious because we keep forcing it into a single story? Because there are at least 2 stories competing here. One story says it's a medieval relic, created in an age that produced many powerful devotional images, and it succeeded because it was persuasive. Another story says it's older, and the medieval record is simply the point where it re-enters the stage of history. And both stories must explain the same stubborn facts. The shroud appears to the world clearly in the 1350s. So I'll leave you with a final set of questions. If the carbon date is correct, what technique created an image that behaves like a negative and resists simple explanation? If the carbon date is compromised, what exactly compromised it, and where is the decisive proof? If the image is a medieval creation, why do some of its features look unexpectedly forensic? And if the image is not medieval, why does its secure historical record begin where it does? Or is this something beyond any human technique, hinting at one final, unsettling explanation? Are we actually looking at the face of Jesus? Okay, so that was a tricky one, but I hoped you enjoyed it. You've been watching The Midnight Investigator. If this interests you, please like and subscribe. We will be back for more investigations. In the meantime, question everything. Don't let someone else do your thinking. Thank you for watching.